Hey guys, Saeed here. Welcome to Psychology of Spirituality. I'm here sitting in a private clinic. So I've already started working at a private clinic as a sixth-year student, and I want to give you guys some information, some experiences of the differences of working in a private clinic versus a school district and a juvenile center. Some of the issues that are brought up time and time again from individuals wanting to receive treatment. Person-centered therapy, going into some of the research on therapeutic alliance, as I've been doing in my therapy series right here. I would also suggest this video right here where I speak from last year when I worked at a middle school, which gives more context as to psychology in a more communal setting, right? So right off the bat, I'm showing this video right here, fast forward, just giving you an idea of what a private clinic even looks like, right? I mean, just look around you, right? It's me, an intern, a PhD student, or maybe someone else, an LPC, or maybe a marriage counselor, or maybe a trauma specialized counselor, sitting in this room, in this office building, on this corner of the city, as individuals, families, couples, children are brought in to receive care, healing, connection, treatment, as we call it, right? Number one, the healthcare infrastructure of this country and the difficulties many people have in accessing resources and truly trying to understand services and coordinated care. Most of the people who come to a private clinic, it isn't like how we think about it, right? They just like Google Maps a clinic that's close to them, and then they just come and they just pay $100, right? That's only maybe like 5% of the clientele, right? 95% are Medicaid or some other insurance. They have health insurance, right? And they want to access services for whatever issue themselves or a loved one might be going through, right? One of the families who was just in here was telling me that it took them a year and a half to get access to services, right? Because the conglomerate of our healthcare insurance agencies providing good, accessible care isn't always on the forefront of their minds, right? They referred them, and this was a 17-year-old teenager, they referred them to a senior care agency, right, for a couple of months. That was the only service that was provided for them, right? So there's a lot of work done on the insurance side of things, and that's a huge part of being involved and immersed in this setting, which I'm still familiarizing myself with, right? Even things like copay deductibles, right? Clinical note taking, right? There's a lot of logistics that come with working in a private clinic, right? It's also much more of an artificial setting as compared to working in a school, which is much more of a natural setting, right? You're working with youth, teenagers, children, and you have multiple levels and multi-tiered dimensions of their life with their friends, with their parents, when you can access the parent very easily, right? You have a lot more time to build a relationship, right? There are so many possibilities of working in a school setting or even in a juvenile setting, right? Which requires a lot more short-term problem solving because a lot of the times the youth aren't in there for so long. But in some sense, right, it's much more direct, right? Lots of the kids in juvenile, right, they've hit a point in their life where they know they need change. They're much more open to feedback and building a relationship with someone. Here in a private clinic, you're only given 50 minutes to do so much of the work, right? And a lot of the time you have parents just dragging their kids by their ear, right? Because they're having trouble in school. A lot of the parents aren't aware that they can receive services through the school. So they, access their healthcare insurance, which orients them to come to a clinic like this and sit across from an intern like myself, right? Who, yeah, we can do a lot of work on our end, right? But that intrinsic motivation and readiness to change, as I spoke about in my part 4 video right here, as I discussed right here, right? So I'm very open with patients and clients that I'm seeing who as of now have only been youth and teenagers, right? Because I guess that's my specialty. So, there's a reason I'm not doing therapy with like a 75-year-old veteran, right? Even though that would be a good experience, right? Because it's not the expertise that I have in my graduate training and my previous experiences in schools and juvenile centers, right? So I'm very open with the people that I see over here on what entails therapy, right? And that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on building a connection and solidifying goals and lots of these different components of the therapeutic alliance, as I'm showing in this article right here, right? But as is always the case, right, the human variable is unquantifiable. As it says in this article right here, with even a standardized intervention such as CBT, right, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the mainstream modality, right? If you're a person who's undergoing depressive symptoms and you want to receive services, 85% of the likelihood of you seeing a CBT trained psychologist, therapist, it's much more likely, right? Because it's built into our insurance model, right? 10 to 12 sessions, problem solving, really trying to concretize the steps needed for cognitive change, behavioral activation, and really doing a good job measuring the progress session to session, right? But even in such a technical intervention like that, right, this article finds that empathy, empathetic understanding, interpersonal effectiveness, collaboration, and feedback, expressed empathy are the essential elements of the therapeutic relationships, right? And this is very interesting, right? Because I've been reading through lots of these different manuals on different therapeutic modalities, motivational interviewing, dialectical behavioral therapy, ACT, right? And on my website, I have a bunch of these free resources that I built in, right? I'm training myself because I want to familiarize myself with these different interventions, because I see myself as kind of a holistic healer, mental health professional, because each and every single one of these ingredients can be built together to form an intervention, right? So having a larger view of the puzzle and having more tools on your tool belt, it just makes you better at what you do, right? But even in those manuals, which have lots of technical information on goal setting, ORS, which is a very important part of motivational interviewing, and I'm putting that information right here and also in the description for you all to read more about these different therapeutic models. They put lots of case studies and mock case examples, as I'm showing right here on the CBT example, right? It's just very interesting, right? Just take some time to read through some of these case examples, right? The only way that many of these researchers who are funded by, million-dollar institutions, the know-how that we have in entrenching these principles is through single case studies or mock examples, right? Because these are very technical, abstract principles, right? Like openness to experience and trying to integrate that in a clinical setting, right? Like what does that even mean, right? You need to be exposed to a real life example for you to truly see that. But again, right, so that metaphysical dimension is very important, right? The human beings that we work with are in of themselves complex, multidimensional. They have their own dreams and fantasies, right? In this office right here, like not even 2 hours ago, I had a teenager sitting in here and I was giving him some information on what therapy is, building goals, building a therapeutic alliance, the openness needed, right? I don't call it homework, I call it life work, right? What that looks like, really the critical self-reflection needed to make a therapeutic change. And then out of nowhere, we started talking about sexual neurosis, right? Because I gave an example to him that therapy has changed from like 100 years ago, from Freudian psychoanalysis when it was just laying on the couch, right? And I was just giving an example, right, of how therapy has changed just offhandedly, right? Because just put yourself in this office, right? There's only so much I can read from a manual, right? A lot of it I'm just speaking and collecting my thoughts in an organized, hopefully in a manner that makes sense, right? And really giving them information about what therapy can be, right? But in the course of speaking about Freud, it opened up this conversation on Freud's idea of sexual neurosis, right? And sexual dysfunction in our society, right? Do we build that into the treatment? Right? That's the quintessential part of doing psychology as a profession, as a health profession that's very different from the medical, biomedical profession, right? If someone has a stomach ache, there's very little leeway on how different that looks if you go to a doctor in Costa Rica versus a doctor in Mongolia, right? But with therapy, right, it is the personal expression of the human beings who want healing and connection, right? So in that sense, right, if sexual dysfunction and neurosis is the most prescient dysfunction or detriment to a person's life, then yeah, that'll be the focus of the work that we're trying to achieve, right? But the means to get there can be, that in of itself can be CBT, it can be DBT, it can be existential, it can be cinema, arts, integrated therapy, right? It can even bring on some psychoanalytical aspects, right? Something that 95% of people are not trained in graduate training, right? Because psychoanalysis is seen as a non-evidence-based form of clinical intervention, right? Because it captures dreams, unconscious fulfillments, right? Things which can't be standardized or normed, right?
Are there any other areas besides basketball where you find yourself unable to perform?
No.
I'm just asking.
An obsession.
I've got other skills. I could go back and work on the farm.
Really?
Or maybe I could go back to the jungle and be a missionary again.
What are you saying? That I'm trying to disobey my mama?
I didn't say that. You did, Muggsy.
But I love my mama.
Still can't find anything wrong with us.
Hey.
If there are lots of fantasies that this youth is having, right? Building that into a social skills training which equips the youth with having a more healthy outlet for expressing that sense of sexuality, right? What are the steps that he's doing to build a relationship with someone, right? How much screen time is he engaging in? How much pornography usage is he engaging in, right? How much money is he spending on, OnlyFans and all of this different dysfunctional elements of our society, right? That's a very normal part of lots of the adolescents that come in for therapeutic work, right? And just to give you guys a really great example, there's a show right now on Hulu with Steve Carell called The Patient. It does a really good job of presenting the discharged, spontaneous element of therapy in a very heightened manner, right? Because it's a show, right? And right, Steve Carell is this psychologist who works in this private clinic setting, right? He's just doing this, having these patients come in and out, and then he gets this patient who's like a psychopath who wants to stop murdering people, and he kidnaps Steve Carell, and Steve Carell is forced to do this like impromptu therapy with this maniac who's like forcing him against his own will to work with him, right? So it presents like a level of deep self-awareness and like deep existential guilt and dread that comes upon Steve Carell in the force of trying to get out of the situation, right? He's forced to wrestle with his own demons, right? The relationship that he has with his son, who's become more of an Orthodox Jew, and him and his wife are more liberal, progressive type Jews, right? He goes into the Holocaust, right? Going into more of that deeper collective conscious imagination, right? How suffering has looked like for his people, right? He really has to really delve deep into himself to really find creative and adaptive pathways to try and treat this psychopath who's already killed and will kill more people, right? So it's a great depiction of psychology and mental health training beyond just the graduate institutions that we go through to get the PhD, LPC licenses and placards on our wall, right? There is this entire self-disclosure, self-awareness, self-reflection, self-discovery, spiritual journey for many people that they have to undergo to truly come out the other end. And it's always a journey. It's a never-ending journey, right? To really try and find who we are and what we can bring to this profession, right?
Is this how therapy works?
I don't know, Sam. Did you like being married?
Yeah, I did.
What were the good parts?
When she went with me twice to Kenny Chesney concerts.
How was that?
That's not a question that you ever need to ask, ever, because they are always awesome.
And she liked it too?
I wouldn't say she was a full member of No Shoes Nation. So I told you I was a transport supervisor in a warehouse, but really I'm a restaurant inspector with the Department of Public Health. I figured if I told you the truth, you'd write it down in your notes and the police would find it.
Closing off, I'm just going to give some more information from this article right here on some of the other elements of building a therapeutic alliance and what you all should look for when you are seeking treatment from a mental health professional. So those components of corrective feedback are very, very, very important, especially when it comes to working with youth who often feel like they're being pressured or forced to come into therapy, and oftentimes that is the case, right? Like the parents threaten the kid that they'll take away their car or take away their phone unless they engage in therapy, right? Which is a whole nother video and conversation that I want to make, right? But having informed decision makers is very important, right? Letting the patients, the human beings who come in for treatment, letting them know that they are the proprietors, they are the agent makers of the change process, and if we're doing something wrong, it's incumbent upon them to correct us and for us to build on that collaborative reciprocal element and try and find some healthy solutions to the problems that may be happening. What therapy is, right? And that's self-reflection, self-practice, and mindfulness, right? So that last part is tuning itself more towards elements which are often missed in graduate training, right? The technical side of psychology is very important, right? But the spiritual, the loving, the metaphysical side of psychology is just as important, right? So when you're asking mental health professionals to practice mindfulness, right? That's not solely a technical enterprise, right? You're asking them to deep dive into their own existential philosophical worldviews and to really embed themselves with a sense of self or maybe a sense of no self, right? And in that self-reflection, in that self-journey, there will be an awakening. There will be a deeper expression of empathy, perspective taking, working with patients in a more holistic manner, right? So disclosure is very important in therapy also, right? The people that I work with, it's not just like, okay, sit down, tell me about your problems. It's really giving them a sense of, hey, this is who I am, this is the approach that I take. I have my own ideas, I have my own philosophy, and if you feel like that's interfering with the work that we're doing, you have the right to let me know. That can be a rupture, that can be a problem, and we can move forward with what I can do better, or whether you want to cease and end treatment and find a new therapist, which happens so much of the time, right? I put this statistic in my last videos, right? In my last video, like around over 40% of therapy sessions cease before their termination, right? Which means a lot of people, for one reason or the other, a lot of it is schedules and a lot of it is, busy day-to-day lives, but a lot of it is also the fact that people feel like this is a waste of time. I hear that a lot, right? Do therapy is bullshit, right? And you're right, my natural ego wants to tell them like, yo, that's a direct conflict with my bottom dollar, you saying that, but a lot of the time it is bullshit, right? Because it's not solely a technical enterprise, right? Cognitive adaptations can only work if there's a deep conviction in a person's soul as to why they should undertake such a shift in their perspective or carry out their motor functions to perform this desired behavior for a better self, right? There needs to be a deep philosophy, a deep values integration, right? A deep orientation and worldview of humanity, right? So, which is what a lot of the work that I do with the young people that come in here, right, is really trying to grasp who they are and what their purpose in life is, right? And most of the time, 80-90% of the time, they have no idea, right? I shouldn't say they have no idea, right? Those are natural questions and answers that we try to seek through the course of being humans, right? But a lot of times they haven't been asked that question, right? And our educational institutions don't ask them what their purpose is, right? They ask them what career you want, right? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? But that's not the same question as, why are we here as human beings? There's only so much therapy that can be done here. You come here for 15 minutes, drive across the town, sit in this office, speak for a bit, some activities that we do, you know, some mindfulness exercises, and then you go about your day, right? Most of therapy, most of healing will be done at a social, spiritual systems level, right? And that means both top-down change and building a more comprehensive insurance system which prioritizes coordinated care, which prioritizes human beings instead of CEO profits, and also bottom-up individual change also, right? We can't always just look to the sky and look above for change to come from our masters, right? We need to really look at ourselves and see that, yeah, these decrepit institutions are also a reflection of our own souls, right? Which is the beauty of doing healing and therapy, right? Is you empower people to really see themselves as more capable than what they believed they were. In the best of cases. In the worst of cases, you just don't connect, right? There are ruptures that keep happening and problems that keep happening. I've never been in that type of situation, but again, schools are much, much, much more different. You have much more time to be a part of the student's, the child's life, right? I like these videos where I just speak from my heart on the experiences that I'm going through. I hope you all benefited. As always, I'm putting links in the description for you all to learn more, and you know, different movie clips that I'm using also, and also my website, which has a bunch of free therapeutic resources for you all to learn from also. So with that, thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.